In 2017, after dwindling sales, Ubisoft greatly pivoted the game design of their Assassin's Creed titles, releasing Assassin's Creed Origins as a completely different open-world RPG for the first time in the franchise history. Yes, you have clicked on the right video, by the way, just stick with me, this will be relevant. The game sold well, leading Ubisoft to double down on this pivot even harder by releasing Assassin's Creed Odyssey the following year. Assassin's Creed Odyssey was received well, mainly by newcomers who were playing it as their first entry into the franchise, whereas long-term fans from before the pivot of Assassin's Creed Origins pretty much hated it for resembling nothing like the original games that they had fallen in love with. And so, essentially, this has resulted in the Assassin's Creed fanbase being split into two, with neither camp ever really being satisfied at any one given time. In 2023, Ubisoft released Assassin's Creed Mirage as a more old-school oriented experience, and the new fans just didn't really care. It didn't sell as well as the newer games because it didn't have as mainstream of a pull, even though it went back to the original game design. And when Assassin's Creed Shadows released earlier this year, not only did generally it have mixed reactions even from the newer fans, but old school fans did not care for it. This has led to seemingly lower and lower sales, although it has only been a couple of years since the change, and a fanbase that is never really fully satisfied. This is an issue that should never really happen because it can only stem from a mistake in management that has caused such a rift. To be fair, it's clear to see why these decisions are made to pivot so greatly.
Money!
And staleness. This is nothing new in the world of business. It's essentially just a rebrand, which is done time and again by hundreds and thousands of businesses. But there is such a thing as overcorrection, and that is where I take issue with, and that is what I feel happened to the Assassin's Creed franchise, which has led to this division in the fanbase. Unfortunately, in my opinion, this has happened in the world of DC Comics, and only as recently as 4 years ago. In 2021, DC released a comic book titled Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow, written by acclaimed comic book writer Tom King. Next year, if it stays on schedule, in 2026, Supergirl will release as one of the first live-action movies of James Gunn's new DCU. This film is based on Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow, and that was actually what the movie was originally titled before being changed to just Supergirl. The comic book Woman of Tomorrow is critically acclaimed, with many even considering it one of Supergirl's best, even maybe of all time. There's just one problem with this comic, however. Supergirl's characterization in Woman of Tomorrow is absolutely nothing like traditional Supergirl. Now, don't get me wrong, the quality of the book is incredible. However, the impact of this change in characterization on the fanbase is, in my opinion, pretty terrible. Whilst I'm pretty sure that Tom King was just trying to write an interesting character drama and wasn't trying to permanently change the characterization of Supergirl, and the writing is exceptional, it has unfortunately led to some similar issues that plagued Assassin's Creed. You see, in Woman of Tomorrow, Supergirl doesn't really act like Supergirl, at least not traditionally. Introduced to comics in 1959, Supergirl has most often been depicted as an optimistic, bright and hopeful character who's sometimes brash and naive, and has similar powers to that of her very famous cousin. Her stories range from taking place on Earth to other planets, or dealing with issues like dual identity like Spider-Man, to being young and not having as much experience as other superheroes. And before someone corrects me, I'm aware that technically she is older than Superman, but she got stuck in the Phantom Zone, which stopped her from physically aging for a while. Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow, however, is a serious drama depicting Supergirl's PTSD and trauma from seeing her planet explode when she was young, and featuring her swearing and heavily drinking alcohol. Whilst, as I've mentioned many times now, the writing is fantastic, and Supergirl does occasionally display some of her more typical characteristics, this is, like I mentioned, not really anything like the usual Supergirl. Now, I've seen many people praise his writing because it is very realistic for someone who watched their planet explode. Of course, he would have lots of trauma from that, and it is quite logical to depict them as having some form of PTSD. First of all, however, logic is never really a key factor of comic book writing. I mean, Batman runs around fighting crime with a 12-year-old. And second of all, Supergirl just has never been depicted with these traits, even if it is more logical. In the near 70 years that she's been in comics, Woman of Tomorrow is the first time that Supergirl has been depicted this way. And whilst it may be more logical, it's not who Supergirl has been established to be as a character. Now, the fan base that loved the naive but optimistic teenage superhero are going to have to watch a movie in which that same character gets drunk, swears, and has PTSD. I think that this inevitably will leave some fans of the character disappointed, especially her original comic fans who may feel like they aren't getting the depiction that they deserve. I've seen many people online already criticize her short appearance in Superman, because she's drunk and she swears at Superman. And then people who like the film will usually reply and say, well, it's comic accurate. Well, sort of. Yes, it is comic accurate to Woman of Tomorrow, which, yes, is the comic book that it's based on, but it's not comic accurate to the character for the past 70 years. And these types of conflicts that I see online where one person is unhappy with a depiction because it's so unlike who Supergirl is as a character will then be responded to with, oh, but it's comic book accurate, so it's an invalid criticism. It's a perfectly valid criticism because yes, whilst it is comic accurate to Woman of Tomorrow, it's nothing at all like the character and like the character has been for the past 66 years. And this is the sort of division that, the fan base of Assassin's Creed has. And in my opinion, is quite a major issue. To me, at least, it's a perfectly valid criticism to say that the Supergirl in Superman isn't comic accurate, because she isn't really. And if you didn't read a Supergirl comic that released only 4 years ago out of a 66-year-long history, then you won't know that it is technically comic accurate. So how can you be expected to know that? And it definitely is a valid criticism in my opinion. I've been talking a lot about character, and so I want to use a sort of categorization to further demonstrate my points. There's this business theory called a two-factor theory, in which ways to motivate employees are factored into two different groups: motivators and hygiene factors. I promise this is relevant. Basically, motivators are the most important things that motivate employees, and hygiene factors are less important things, but they're nice additions nonetheless. We can apply this to characterization or aspects of a character in comic books. So motivators will be the most important parts of the character, like their personality, maybe their powers, the supporting cast, maybe the setting of the stories, like, Gotham's pretty important for Batman. It can vary from character to character, but the most important things. And then hygiene factors are things that are less important, still nice, but not crucial for the stories. Things like character design, character equipment. I mean, we've seen countless of different looks for like Batman or Spider-Man in movies. It changes all the time because it's less exactly crucial to get spot on the exact same every time. So with Supergirl, her motivators will probably be things like her personality, her power set, her origin story from Kandor, Crypto, the dog, and things like that. And then maybe her hygiene factors will be things like her costume or where the story takes place, because sometimes it's on Earth, sometimes it's in space, where she, lives in the story, kind of similar to takes place, just things that are less important for the story or for the character. So the problem is with Woman of Tomorrow that Tom King changed the motivators, not the hygiene factors. If you change the hygiene factors, it's not as impactful because they're less crucial. But Tom King changed her personality, which is one of the biggest and most major motivators, which, like I've mentioned, changes it greatly. And now this seemingly has had possibly a permanent impact on the character, which has led to things like the movie. In my opinion, a similar but slightly better handling of changing these characters is DC's new Absolute line, which basically changes the origins, outfits, and equipment of DC's heroes without changing their personality. So far, this has been pretty successful, with Absolute Batman, Wonder Woman, and Martian Manhunter all gaining mass praise and absolute Wonder Woman winning an Eisner Award. Now, if we apply the two-factor theory here again, then character design and equipment are hygiene factors and less important, so there isn't much of a negative impact there. Most importantly, however, they have left the biggest and most important motivator untouched: the personality. This is definitely a key reason why so far the Absolute line has been so successful, because this keeps them essentially the same character as their original comic counterparts, which we already know are quite beloved. There is danger with the Absolute line, however, as well. The pretty significant motivator of the origin story of the characters have been changed, and due to the pretty great reception of the Absolute line, I've seen people online call for aspects of the Absolute version of the characters be adopted into the mainline comic version of the characters. And personally, I think this is an awful idea. First of all, pretty much all hygiene factors have been changed, from giving Batman a battle axe to making Wonder Woman use more magic or give her a bunch of different lassos, to completely changing the colour palettes of like Superman. Additionally, the origins of the Absolute versions are completely different to the comics versions. And whilst this is integral to the Absolute stories, it does make them pretty far removed from the original comic versions. In fact, the only real things that keep them similar are, like I mentioned, personality and also supporting cast. And the characters around them, such as the Batman, there's still Alfred, most of his villains, same goes for Wonder Woman and Superman and the rest of the heroes. However, there is a reason why Batman and Superman and Wonder Woman and all of these other characters are as popular as they are. And it's because of like their origin stories and they could relate to them, or because of their colour palettes or costume designs, or even a sense of patriotism from the likes of Superman with the red, white and blue. Adopting characteristics from the Absolute line would not only remove beloved aspects from the comic book characters, but also cause fan division once more, sparking a conflict between the older comic book fans who preferred the original version and the newer fans of the Absolute version of the character. This would then of course lead to the same situation that Assassin's Creed and Supergirl finds themselves in, with one camp of fans always finding themselves unhappy or dissatisfied. To be clear, I do love the Absolute series. I think that Absolute Wonder Woman is great thanks to the writer Kelly Thompson, and even personal favourites of mine like Bane are getting pretty great depictions in Absolute Batman, but for now at least I think they do need to stay separate from their mainline comic book versions. So next year we will have to see how well Supergirl is received, and if some of her longtime comic book fans do have issues, in which case I think DC have a serious problem on their hands. Management with big brands like DC always need to be careful with things like this, in my opinion, because splitting these fans into different groups not only of course causes fan dissatisfaction, but could even lower the sales of the business altogether, which is why I feel concerned seeing Supergirl's first movie adaptation in 40 years adopt a completely different personality for her, but I guess we'll have to wait and see. Thanks for watching.